thank everybody for attending this morning. This is our first meeting of phase 2 of recodification, so we're excited to get started. Bob Ritchie and Bob Mitchell are here. They're our consultants. They'll be working with us through this phase. Most of you guys know them. Scott, you're, I think, new to this process. So Bob and Bob, Scott, he's from the Zoning Board of Appeals. We'll do sort of, I figure, just a brief introduction as we get started, but I just wanted to start off with some just basic logistics. As most of you know, these meetings will be open to the public. And so we're going to just allow the public to participate via the chat. Charlotte has offered to chair the meeting. And, you know, as I mentioned before, we're going to be recording and posting all these meetings to the Recodification webpage. Later on in the agenda, I think we're going to be talking a little bit about, you know, future meetings and the frequency of those meetings. But, you know, we'll leave that discussion to the end. And with that, those are my, you know, my intro comments. If there's any questions, you know, I can try to answer them now, or we can just jump right into the content.
Could I please just add a note to this business about chairing the meeting? It's the understanding between Jed and me, and now I hope among all of us, that in our last, in phase 1, I wasn't really aware that we had a chair. The meetings were really conducted by Bob and Bob because they're doing all the work, really, and we're commenting on their work. But Jed pointed out we need a chair now because we might be going into having the public here or having public hearings, in which case we actually would need a chair. But until then, I'm hoping we'll operate as we did in phase 1, so that our consultants who have done, along with Jed, a lot of the thinking for this will really be organizing the meetings, doing the logistics for it, and leading us along from topic to topic. You don't have to speak through the chair the way you would in a meeting. We're just here commenting on the items as they come up. I hope.
Yes.
So acceptable.
It's actually more of like an expediter to just try to expedite the meeting rather than being a chair, so to speak.
Thanks, Frank. Great.
Yeah, and Charlotte, I would just say that because we're now in public forum, that all these meetings will be public, it's really necessary for somebody on the work group to be the face of the work group in terms of quote unquote being chair, to, you know, deal with public issues and public questions and whatnot. That's not really the role of the consultant.
No, that's right. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I think one of the issues is at what point are the public free to comment and us to respond to their comments? And for this meeting, at least, and maybe for subsequent meetings until we decide to change it, the thought is that we would, they would put their comments in the chat. And as we're coming toward the end of the meeting, we would allow time to look at them and respond to them rather than having them enter item by item. That might not work well, but we'll see how it works and change it if we need to.
Charlotte, I think that makes sense because we only have a limited amount of time, probably an hour and a half, to do these meetings, and we should be able to run through our agenda and our issues without really getting off track or being directed off into somewhere on the side. So I think that makes sense. If it doesn't work out, we can change it, but I think that's a good way to start.
Okay, great. So that's the way we'll go forward. So as we come toward the end of our agenda for the day, we'll save at least the final 20 minutes, 15 minutes to look at the chat and respond if need be. And if not, just continue using our time until the end.
Yep.
Okay, great. So we're ready then to begin. And I want to thank you first, Bob and Bob, for the work that you put in today in getting this all organized. And our homework for today was to go through and see, to look at the priorities that have been marked from phase 1 and see if we agree with those priorities or to change them to see how we're going to approach the work so that we don't find that we've used the time that we already can afford on minor items, but we get the major work done. So I guess we'll give each person a chance to say where they see their particular priorities. I think we'll start with the zoning board to see what, because I know the least about your thinking, where you see the priorities.
Excuse me, Charlotte, could I back up a little bit?
Sure.
Before we get into the matrix and the review of that, Bob and I wanted to bring everybody kind of up to date with some other things that are going on and where we are in the bigger picture of phase 2.
Good.
That be
Great.
okay?
I
Yeah.
didn't know you had other things. All right.
So there are a variety of aspects to phase 2. And the matrix and the priorities are certainly the biggest part of all of that. But there's other things that we will either we know we'll need to address or we know we might need to address. And there have been some conversations that you should just be aware of. So a couple of things. We've already found a couple of places in the adopted bylaw where the numbering was incorrect. Now, those are easy fixes because the town clerk has the ability to fix incorrect, typo errors, if you will, on the numbering and the lettering. So we're going to provide Jed and Michaela with those. There's 2 sections we found, 2 small sections, and that can just be fixed. So that's just one of the minor things. But there is apparently a couple of things that got left out of what got adopted that should have been in the adopted document bylaw. So we're going to have to review that and see if that's the case. And then if so, we'll bring that back to the attention of the work group. And if you want them back into the bylaw, then that would have to go on the list of what goes to town meeting in the fall to get back into the bylaw. As you know, the Attorney General's office has to review the adopted bylaw, and the Attorney General will review the entire bylaw, and we're expecting that to be done shortly. And Bob has had some conversations with the Attorney General's office. You have anything you'd like to add there, Mr. Ritchie?
Not really. My understanding is that March 1st is the date by which the Attorney General would be acting. I did speak with Kelly Gunnigan at the AG's office. As far as I know, there's no initiated effort to extend the time for the AG's review. That would require the town's consent in any event. But we're hoping to get feedback as soon as possible, because once we have the approved bylaw, incorporating all of the changes in phase 1, that would be sort of the foundation for all of the work that Bob and I would be doing in phase 2. So hopefully within a matter of days, we should have a document that will be what we will be modifying as we go forward with the items on the priority list.
And one of the things we'll be looking for from the AG's office is, do they have any comments about the adopted document? Is everything okay? Or do they want some changes to it? That might happen. Or sometimes the Attorney General's office will include a letter and has some language about, well, this section, maybe you should consider, there's language about maybe you should review this section or something like that. So there may be items from the AG's review that we'll have to add to the phase 2 list to fix going forward. So just keep that in mind. The phase 2
It's also theoretically possible that there are lurking within the text of the bylaw that's under review areas that the Attorney General finds to be inconsistent with the Constitution and laws of the Commonwealth. So in that instance, the Attorney General will help us in phase 2, purging the document that we're working with of any residual inconsistencies. So I tend to look on the involvement of the Attorney General as a member of the team. We're trying to get a good legally defensible document that will be the bylaws for the town that address all of the concerns that the Attorney General has. Once we have that action of the Attorney General and have attended to all of the inconsistencies that the AG has found and have processed all of the recommendations that the AG has offered us to think about, then we're going to go forward, at least with the confidence that we have a defensible document going forward. At that point, all of the changes will be addressing the concerns of the town, not the state.
And then finally, you will all recall that at the fall town meeting, there were other zoning amendments adopted by town meeting, the mixed use zoning, and then for the mixed use zoning anyway, there either was one or a couple of amendments that were adopted on town meeting floor. Those also went to the AG's office. Once we hear back from the AG's office on those amendments, I will renumber them because they were adopted using the Roman numeral system that we once had. And I'll provide those to Jed and Michaela and give them the information about where exactly those amendments, those town meeting, mixed use and the other zoning need to be plugged into the new format. And then they can just plug that in and it'll be part of, as Bob mentioned, the foundation document that we'll be using going forward. So with that, that's the updates I have. Those are the updates I have. And we can move to the phase 2 list. Just a couple of notes in terms of the key. We indicated in the past the work group has identified certain items that they thought should be or could be a priority for phase 2. We identified those with the capital bolded P in the left-hand column. And the second thing is that the phase 2 list, just recall, is a combination of the items that came up during all of our work group meetings that the staff, consultants, and work group raised as possible phase 2 items. And then the comments from the reviewers. You sent out the draft of the zoning bylaw, and Bob Ament and Attorney Moynihan, and there was another attorney came back with a very long list of comments because they thought they were reviewing the whole bylaw and not just the new amendments. Once all that got compiled, just as again a little review, the work group went through all of that and decided which ones you wanted on the phase 2 list and which ones you didn't. So you've already removed a whole long list of things that you rejected from being on phase 2. So the list you have in front of you is what's remaining and up to date. And I did in the issue column where the comment was from one of the outsiders, I did put our reviewer suggested blah, blah, blah. So wherever you see our reviewer suggested blah, 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 that's one of the attorneys, Ament, Moynihan, and the other attorney's comment. All the other issues are internally raised by the work group and the staff and the consultants. So that's kind of the context of the document.
Okay, so we're ready to go forward. Yes, so now Is that right, Bob? You're all set?
Yeah, and our goal today is we want to start working on this, in March. So we can start, however many we end up with, and we'll have to talk about that based on time and budget. What will we start working on in March and start drafting or start creating some, what we're calling discussion documents, because some of these are policy issues, and before we get to drafting, you're all going to have to discuss what you want to do with the policy. So that's our goal today, is to come out with, sort of a consensus confirmed. These are the things we're going to start with in March.
Great. Okay, so let's hear where people think the priorities belong. Actually, I want to change what Noreen, you want to start?
I would be happy to. I think at this point in time, I have a very short and sweet list, but it's nonetheless something that is regularly plaguing for the zoning board. And
Yeah.
there's two items. One item is setbacks. So particularly what we're finding is that we're looking at street setback from the street, which is typically 25 feet. And what's happening is we're having people show us the facade of their house being at, we'll say 25, and that they are excluding a landing and stairs that would be closer to the street than the front facade of the house. And what people have mentioned to us is that they refer to these as, quote, landscape features, because they're not, quote, attached to the house. Now, I guess my argument is that without the stairs and landing, you could not access the dwelling. And that indeed the material that the stairs are made of should not affect how that's viewed. But nonetheless, I guess what I'm looking for is a really potentially tight, definitive way to look at that setback. Because what we also find is a rollout of that. Whereas if you allow someone's facade to be at 25 feet, but they have a landing and stairs that say goes 8 feet closer to the street, the next party that purchases the house says, well, I've already got a landing that's closer to the street, so I should be able to use that closer point for my house. So, or, now where you have houses that are elevating, people are looking for a set of stairs that could go up even to what would be the second floor of a house. So while we have obviously pre-existing non-conforming circumstances where people will come in and say, hey, I'm already 8 feet from the street, I want to stay at 8, or I'll improve it slightly to 9, I still would be looking to have a better definition or a tighter expression in the bylaw to talk about how those setbacks are evaluated.
Wouldn't that be a policy question of what the town wants to do?
Yeah.
Well, I think what I would like is to have it be firmly in print in the bylaw, so that we are not perhaps evaluating these differently, and that we have a standard that we're pointing to.
Do we know what the building commissioner's experience or position or thinking or anything like that might be on this topic?
Well, we have a weird circumstance right now where we have an acting building commissioner. So the town is looking for a new building commissioner. I guess what has been reported to me is that they have eyed this landscape feature before, but of course, necessarily, you still have the circumstance where someone, you have to have, I was told, a 4x4 landing in front of a door. That's code. Now, obviously, depending on the height of that entryway, you may need one stair, you may need several stairs.
Noreen, could I interrupt you?
Yep, absolutely.
Seems like we're getting into the work rather than setting priorities.
Sure. Okay, so
Right.
I guess what I would say is the setback with the stairs was one thing, and then the other was what is included in total lot coverage.
Okay, and we'll leave the exploration of that issue to when the work actually begins. So you had two.
Yes. Yep, thank you.
So neither one of those are on the list now. So you're recommending that they be put on the list?
That would be my preference, only because it seems to be a regular item that comes up before us.
Okay, Scott, did you want to add to that?
Charlotte, quite honestly, and for the working group, my apologies. I'm fairly far behind. I was trying to catch up over the last day and a half, so I think I'm going to kind of keep my comments to myself right now and try and learn as much as I can from all of you. So right now, I would hate to try and slow anybody down, quite honestly. So I have no comment at this point.
You're where I am at the beginning of phase one. Right, I recognize that. Okay, Jerry.
One minor comment might go on with Noreen's on setbacks, and this is maximum height considering elevations required to flood zones or needing to be so far above whatever the flood zone elevation is. That may be a policy issue that we don't allow anybody to go over 35, whatever the number is, regardless of how high they have to elevate the foundation or the first floor to be in compliance.
Okay, Frank.
Thank you, Charlotte. Well, let me just start by saying that this is my last meeting participating as town council. Starting the next time, there'll be a new one here. It'll be Maura O'Keefe, who's presently an assistant city solicitor in Newton, and she takes over on March 7th. Now, I'm staying here as a senior counsel for 7 weeks after that to the end of April, and then I'll be retired. But I'm not leaving this project. I intend to stay on it indefinitely, probably till it's completed, if it's completed reasonably promptly.
Oh, that's great.
Because I'm very interested in it and I want to see it. I looked at the matrix which we were provided, and I think everything on it is very important. But I do have a couple of comments, and some of these are priorities and some of these are comments. One of the things I would like to have us do is take a look at municipal uses in the zoning bylaw. Falmouth has in its bylaw that it is, as a municipality, is subject to the bylaw, and that has caused, some constraints over time, some of which are good, some of which are not really very helpful. But I see that in the future, where we're looking at climate change, we're looking at all kinds of different situations that we can't really think about right now or plan for. I think that we have to allow for maximum flexibility for municipal purposes to reply or respond to changes in circumstances or problems that are created by climate or environmental issues. So I'd like to have us address that issue of municipal uses. Another one is home occupations. I think we've seen in the last few years, more and more people are going to be working from home, and home occupations and home service issues, I think, are going to come before the Board of Appeals or the Planning Board regularly. This is a good time to take a look at that. I think it's a very changing field of law. We've been doing a lot of work recently on accessory dwelling units. This is an opportunity to really tighten that up. Mixed use development, we've already started that, particularly with the Davis Straits and the bylaw that was adopted at the November town meeting. But I think that's another area where we should take a look. The floodplain it's been represented by Noreen and Jerry just a few minutes ago. It's very challenging to deal with this, particularly with the dimensional issues. Planned residential development, I think it's an area where we should take a look at. There's probably going to be more and more use of the planned residential developments by special permit going forward in the future. We have to take a look at all the dimensional requirements of the of the zoning bylaw to see that there's some consistency and also to see if they make sense. I'm reminded of a story that a number of years ago, when I first started here, we had a setback requirement for docks. They had to be 50 feet back from the water's edge. So I think that there's a possibility that there are some of these little tweaks that should be made to kind of take care of that. And then if you look at the economic activity in town, commercial accommodations and restaurants are probably two of the most vibrant parts of our economy. So I think the zoning bylaw should be looked at with respect to commercial accommodations and restaurants to allow for the development of those industries without any unnecessary constraints. And those are the areas that I see that we would like to take a look at. I think this zoning bylaw recodification is probably going to be the last best chance to do some significant change to the zoning bylaw for quite some time.
Okay, I guess I'll speak now for the planning board, and then Jed is going to speak for the planning department on where we want to see. We certainly don't disagree with the priorities that were set through the recodification, and it looks like the first ones I had noticed under general bylaw comments and issues, that's where the two Bobs have directed our attention. As far as the remainder, the one I would like to see us pay a lot of attention to is the floodplain overlay district. Among the overlay districts, there's going to be a lot of focus on that. There already has been. There are areas in it, it's hard to find out where's the V zone. Things just need clarification and more information really to make this a useful thing. So I'm hopeful that that will be, that Article 7 and the floodplain overlay district will be among the first things that get looked at. The other is the definition section, I think would be a good thing. But looking through it, the area that has been plaguing us on the board doesn't really appear here, and it has to do with standards for road width, how to deal with all of now that people are wanting to sell off their back lots, but many of the back lots are on dirt roads that are only accessible by one car. They're so very substandard. And what we've found is that we really don't want to lose any of our flexibility in helping people to adapt those roads to wider use. So I'd like to see, I don't really want it in the bylaws. It's good that it's just sort of understood that it's going to be a judgment that's made primarily by the fire department, is the one we pay the most attention to, but we're not stuck on any one of them. We can actually use our judgment and be flexible to try to see if we can ease those roads into better condition. So just those things.
Charlotte,
Yeah,
on that last one, road issues are not within the purview of zoning.
no, they're not, but they're in, okay,
They are subdivision regulations.
yes,
And, our scope and our contract has nothing to do with the subdivision regulations.
okay. And we're not
So-
changing that.
If you want us to work on that, that would have to be a contract amendment with some additional money.
No.
Or down the road, the next contract.
Right,
Something like
maybe.
that.
Yeah,
But just when there is a distinction between what you can deal with under the subdivision and what you can deal with under zone.
okay.
Okay,
Jed.
thank you. I agree with a lot of what Frank mentioned. I guess I'll just piggyback a little bit on what Charlotte mentioned as well. For me, it's the definitions. Being a newbie and just getting into the bylaw for the past 6 months or so, I feel like the definitions could use a lot of work. The other element would be the parking section. For me, that's and it was noted in the matrix as well. Several areas that I think need some attention. I'd like to see, if possible, the accessory dwelling unit or accessory apartment language be pulled out of the use table and put into its own separate section, if possible. I think the use table currently now is gorgeous. I just absolutely love it. But that one section of it is, there's a lot of text there, and I'm hopeful that we can just pull that out. And then I guess the last item would be TDR, focusing on creating a revised TDR bylaw, if possible. That's probably way down the road, but that's another element for me.
Okay, Bob Mitchell, how would you like to get going now for the rest of?
Well,
Quick question or two. What is CDR? Jed mentions CDR.
Sorry, I probably wasn't clear enough. It was TDR. T is in tiger.
Oh, TDR, okay. And
transfer of development rights.
Correct.
Okay. Gotcha. And the other thing on, does access to a lot, especially when it turns a lot into 40B, a potential lot, once we recognize it as a lot, is that still not a zoning issue, but a subdivision issue?
Right, access to a lot. In terms of access to a lot is a subdivision lot, or a subdivision issue, along with, curb cut permit from the Department of Public Works.
Okay, I won't go into it. I know there's been some controversy on access, but thank you.
So Charlotte, I wanted to have Bob and I weigh in on this list that we're talking about.
Great.
So you, all of you have touched on almost all of the top priorities that were listed in the matrix, but not all of them. There's a couple I want to mention for a variety of reasons. One thing I just wanted to go back to, Frank mentioned home occupation and home-based business. That's one of the items we found that people were most confused about in all our interviews and talking with people, because it's not clear to the outside reader what the real distinctions are, and there seems to be conflicts between those two things, those two items, and when one's okay and the other's not, and why is there a distinction, and why you have these two different things. So I think as part of that reviewing of that, some probably policy discussion once we kind of present you with an overview of what the issues are, as to whether you need both of those still, and if so, how do you make them distinctive enough so people actually understand the distinction? So, but beyond that, going back to other items. So one of the items that came up over and over again, and even came up on town meeting floor, is agriculture.
Oh,
And we had, I forgot what the gentleman's name was, concerned about, he thought things were being taken out regarding agriculture, and they weren't. But as Bob Ritchie has pointed out to the committee, and some of you should remember this, the current agriculture is all over the place in your bylaw, and it's way out of date. It is not in conformance with state laws and whatnot. And we have here Mr. Ritchie, who was the former legal counsel for the Department of Agriculture, who is an expert in the state on agriculture and agricultural regulations. So for us, we think that should be one of the top priorities. And we may actually hear from the Attorney General on that. Don't know for sure, but whether we do or not, that whole topic really needs to be addressed seriously. Similarly with earth moving, that was another one that came up because it's out of date, and it was confusing to people, and it didn't seem to meet what people thought it was supposed to be doing. And again, Bob has his expertise in that, and So just from our perspective about what our expertise are, I don't want to totally drop what we can give you the best of. And so those are two items we think should be, going forward for fall town meeting.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in and say that these are two areas that when we start to work in March, I'm going to focus my initial attentions to. My thought is basically that where we're starting from is a town that has demonstrated favorable attitudes toward agriculture. So it's not likely that there would be too many difficulties in configuring the bylaw under phase 3 for full consistency with state laws, with no upset to the town's bias in favor of agriculture wherever it can be done, with only suitable conditions and restrictions upon it that are allowed by state law. So I don't contemplate any major shift in the core functions of agriculture in the bylaw. I think it'll be relatively straightforward, and particularly with the AG's assistance to make certain that what we do is reviewed in advance for consistency as well. So earth removing is very often and almost typically an element of agricultural operations, but it also needs to comply with state environmental laws and regulations. So the bylaw needs to be careful to regulate earth removal carefully within the narrow boundaries of what it can do, consistent with the laws of agriculture and the regulations, environmental regulations as well. So I plan to do that as my first area of attention, and I think it'll be relatively swift.
Yeah, and I think, Bob, piggybacking on that earth movement and earth removal, we are seeing some projects that, depending on the topography of the land, some proposals have had some relatively significant amounts of earth movement proposed. So of course, we also want to tie that into, proper soil erosion and sediment controls and, meeting proper guidelines so that we're not getting somebody who's coming in and sort of leveling the town.
Yeah, in somewhat the same vein as Frank's reference to the dock setback from the lake. I once saw a bylaw that came to me when I was Assistant Attorney General that limited the depth of excavations for cranberry bogs to the point where it wouldn't allow the water to be there. I mean, the bylaw had an intention that was applicable to non-agricultural venues, but that in the connection with the cranberry bog, it has to be deep enough for the water to be there. So, I mean, those are the kinds of things that we're trying to introduce consistency between the thumb on the scale of agriculture and due deference to the environmental laws, coupled with what the town really wants to accomplish within those two boundaries.
The other item, and I don't know whether this is a phase 2 item or it's a longer term item that was particularly came up with the staff and the variety of staff we've had over the time of this project and the planning board members was the whole site plan review issue. How Falmouth does it, how it might do it, how it works, how it doesn't work, how it's confusing to people, that whole kind of issue around site plan review. And but other than that, I think most of the only other, I guess I would say the only other item was, which was that you have a subdivision phasing section in your bylaw. And there were questions about its legality because it's really old and there's been court cases since it. So that might only take some legal analysis on the part of, Bob and I could present some questions about it that would need research. And so I don't know, maybe in the next 7 weeks, Frank could look at it, or otherwise the new incoming town attorney could look at it, but that got put on the list just because of some legal questions about it.
So we've formed a list. And Bob Ritchie has said where his attention is going to go. Bob Mitchell, how would you like to proceed now?
Well, yeah, so I think. So you have a pretty extensive list. And again, you have to add to it the items I mentioned as part of my introduction, the things we need to fix, things we might have to fix because of the Attorney General's review, and any other updates we might have to do to the bylaw. So some of these, I think, are more drafting exercises. You know, we can put together some draft language to address some of the issues, but some of these are policy issues that are going to need to be addressed before we can draft. So one of the things I would like to do is go through this list, not now, and look at, and go back through all my notes on these specific topics. And look at where there were policy questions raised and put together sort of a little document that said, okay, on restaurants, these are the issues that were identified as problems. These were the questions that came up as to, you know, how to deal with restaurants. But what does the town want to do with these issues and these questions? You know, Frank mentioned, I think, flexibility because, you know, restaurants are an important part of town. And so you could go in one direction, you can go in another direction, you can go between those two directions. I think there'll be policy issues about how you allow restaurants, where you allow them. And then that restaurant, I forgot, you know, that whole formula calculation
Yeah,
that actually was repeatedly raised as kind of like, what? And we found some, you know, strange things about it. I mean, there was one section there where the restaurant could only literally, if it literally read, a restaurant could only be open for 1 minute a day at noontime, if you might recall that. So there's other sections in there that are really, you know, if you literally read them, you couldn't run a restaurant by trying to, so I want to identify those topics that fall into that category. And then we would come back to you with, you know, a list of some number of them as sort of a white paper, a white discussion paper or a discussion paper, I guess, saying these are the issues on these topics that need discussion on the part of the work group to flesh out how you want to approach fixing the problems or dealing with it. And then some of these other ones, which were more, I think, redrafting, put those on a separate list, and then we have a better picture of what is being asked of us. And we can give you a better sense of, we've given you a little sense here. Bob wants to start right off on the agriculture and earth moving, and we can move that forward, but we can give you a better sense of what other things should we start with, and with you giving us direction on that in March and April and May, because I don't know how much of all of this list we can get done in time for fall town meeting.
well, Bob, let me ask you and Frank, what is the status of our bylaws while we wait for the Attorney General's office to review them and give their comments? We're now working from, those are our bylaws, but they're unreviewed bylaws. What's their status legally?
well, they've been adopted by town meeting.
Yeah,
Those are your bylaws right now.
so we're not waiting on that.
Well, what we're waiting for is the review of the AGs to say it's all okay, or it's all okay except for this, or you maybe need to change that, but they're not, I mean, Bob can correct me here, but you're not gonna get a letter back from the AG's office saying the entire bylaw is invalid.
No, but I would think as far as a priority goes, correcting whatever the AG says is incorrect would be really important to do it first.
Yes, Charlotte, let me just jump in. The basic law is that the bylaw takes effect after the Attorney General has reviewed it and the clerk posts and publishes it, but it takes effect retroactively to the date town meeting voted it. So once we get the letter back from the Attorney General and the clerk does the administrative follow-ups that are required by statute, the town's bylaw will be as it then appears, but retroactive to the date of the vote at town meeting. So as Bob is correct in saying the bylaw is what the town voted it to be, but so we have to give it a look-see to make sure that the Attorney General hasn't disapproved some section in whole or in part. The Attorney General can't revise the text. The Attorney General can disapprove text. But once we see that, then we know what that foundational document is that will be the ground on which Bob and I begin to work. And that should be available to us within a week or so, Charlotte.
Well, so you said. So I would think that as soon as that arrives, that's where you begin. And many of those are, if they're incorrect, they fall into the redrafting area. We're not going to contest that. So they just move right over to that column, because the sooner we get the separated list and see where the policy questions are, there's the potential, would have to talk it over among ourselves, but there's the potential for our group to meet independently of you to think about the policy things so that we're not on your clock for that, so that we can
Charlotte,
get
very-
one in effect.
I'm sorry to jump in, but my computer died for 30 seconds. Zoom disconnected me. I'm back in again. I wasn't sure what you might have said in the last 30 seconds that I missed.
Well, I was trying to work on money saving as far as for us, not for you, for the contract, so that we could have our policy discussions without involving you, so that it's not on the clock and we're prepared to speak directly with you with one voice when we get back together, so that that policy list will be useful to us for other meetings.
Absolutely, that's a great strategy to move forward.
Right, so we'll be looking forward to getting that separated out list.
I
Terrific,
think
because-
too, Charlotte, when we get the letter back from the Attorney General, if the Attorney General has comments or decides that certain provisions of the recodified bylaw are not approved, that letter is going to be pretty specific, and responding to it, I think, will be fairly easy.
Frank, do you respond to it?
No, we don't respond to it. You have to bring amendments to town meeting. But what I'm saying is that the Attorney General will give you a pretty good direction as to what is not acceptable. Then it'll be very clear to us what we have to change. I don't think the responding to the Attorney General's comments will take up all that much time. I think I'm hoping it will be fairly light and direct.
Okay, because
There is no legal need to respond to the Attorney General. That's sort of the definitive and final judgment on it. We simply have to abide by it.
okay,
And the response would be what Bob and I do to address it.
Yeah.
good. So that doesn't fall on that we can have separate meetings about that side of the fence.
No.
No, okay, that's good. Because there are many items all the way through the matrix where it says it doesn't conform to state law. And I would assume that also is a redrafting thing.
Yeah.
Is it true that as far as the ZBA is concerned, we should be following the bylaw that was approved by town meeting?
Yes.
Okay,
Right, that is the bylaw now, and so that's what the planning board is doing. Right. Except for the things that were left out. There's a section that's missing, I understand, and some other things that were inadvertently not included. They still are things that we need to abide by, yes? No?
No. if
Put
it's-
it back in.
Yeah, you have to put it back in.
Oh,
Yeah.
It was just some small sections, subsections. It wasn't anything giant or big, or, whole sections of existing bylaw. So, and I'm, I don't know, nobody noticed, including us, that there was some language here and some language there that disappeared somewhere along the way. So, again, we're putting a list together for Jed and Michaela on what we have found and what I think Jed has found something too. So that'll just go on for the fall town meeting list.
okay, I think maybe this isn't true, but it seems that we have accomplished our goal for this meeting, which was to see where our priorities are and how we're going to go forward. Is that true? It seems true.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, we
Jed, Frank?
Yeah,
I
no,
concur.
we've identified the priorities, which is the important part. And then, but with also, let me just talk briefly about our town meeting schedule. The November town meeting, everything has to be ready and submitted to the selectmen to be included in the warrant, probably right after Labor Day. So we're thinking of November, but you really should be thinking about September as the date. And also, it's probably not appropriate to talk about it right now, but how much do we want to do for September for the fall, and how much do we want to do for the following spring and so forth? Because I don't see that we should be totally overwhelmed and try to do this all by the fall.
Yeah, I would just add that this whole entire list is not going to be done for the fall. I mean, just as a reality of time, and, some of this is going to take some discussion. So some of this, just as a reality, is probably going to have to, be aimed for the following annual town meeting.
Right.
So does it then make sense to categorize based on, that factor? So what can we do for fall town meeting? What's
Yes.
the spring town meeting and then the following fall town meeting?
Yes, I think that has to be broken out, Jed.
And it seems to me that it would be really useful for Bob and Bob to go over, because we have managed, in saying what our priorities are, we have not much narrowed down the matrix. We managed to put most of it right back there, to go back through it, and at the beginning of the next meeting, to give us a revised set of priorities to see, what do you think is going to be done for the fall, so we can focus on that, and what's going to be done for the spring.
Again, I'm happy to start that list. Again, as I mentioned before, some of the things on that list that we think probably would be good to go to the fall, but are more policy related. Depending on how long policy discussions happen and how difficult it is to come to a decision about what to do about those policies. Some of that might slip. Some of those categorized items might slip to spring 2020.
We might, right, we might have to adjust as we go, but we need a map in order to get going.
Right.
So I just want to make everybody aware, it looks like Bob Dugan and Jonathan Dickinson are going to be just joining. I realized towards the end of the meeting, but I just happened to notice them as attendees who wanted to join from ZBA and from our zoning enforcement division. So
Right, and they must have joined just in the last few minutes.
just in the last few minutes, I just happened to see it. So I apologize if you were waiting there for a while, but I've been trying to keep an eye on everything. So welcome.
What sounds good is that you seem to have everything done, so that's great.
Right.
And I heard the end of Charlotte's comments, and I would agree with her on how to handle it with town meeting and breaking things up.
Oh, and there's Jonathan. So I don't know, Bob and Jonathan, if you wanted to have some other thoughts on setting priorities. That was the purpose of this first meeting. And that's what we've been working on, and we think we have. I don't know that'd be useful because you didn't hear what other people had to say about it. We can fill you in offline.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Yes, please. Sorry about that.
Not a problem. Okay, and we're missing Pat also, and Pat is a thoughtful person, so we'll get some input from her too, and probably forward that to the two Bobs. I hope, Bob and Bob, you don't mind that that's what we call you locally, the two Bobs.
Bob squared.
That's what we get called statewide, not just
I
local.
bet.
Vitamin B2, actually.
Yeah. In that case, I think that we're done for the day. So let me just ask you a question then, because I don't know how this works really. So if we manage to reach our goal for the meeting early, do we come off the clock at that point?
If the
I don't see
meeting-
why we
if you're
wouldn't,
done,
yeah.
You're done.
Great. Okay. Jed, are you ready to go?
I'm ready when you are.
Question, do we have a time for the next meeting?
I don't think that's been set.
Okay,
I think, Jerry, once we get, if we find out if we have more comments from Jonathan and Bob and Pat or not, and if they do have comments, what comments they have to add to the list, it might have some influence on how fast I can get all of this put together that we just talked about. So today is, let's see, today's the 24th. Looking into March, I don't know, is Thursday the good day? Is that the day we're going to try to meet? Jed, do you have a sense of that? Does anybody have a sense of that?
Is it possible not to do Thursdays just because our zoning hearings are on Thursdays? So a lot of times we have to review files or do other things in the office that day.
We've been having the Permitize, the new software on Thursdays as well.
You
Yeah,
used to meet, didn't you used to meet on Tuesdays?
I thought it was Wednesdays. Did
Oh,
we meet on
Wednesday?
Wednesdays?
I think it was Wednesdays.
Wednesdays?
Yeah. Jed, what's your preference? And Frank?
I'm flexible.
Same here, and I just want to remind everybody, because we're going to be doing these as public sessions, we're more than likely not only doing potentially a different day, but a different time of the day too. So if we can mix in some evening meetings to allow for public to participate, that would be good as well. But I'm flexible.
Well, as a retired person, I'm probably among the most flexible here. So we tell you what, town hall people, why don't you work it out together and make a proposal, and we'll see how it goes. Look at your other schedules and see what works.
Yeah, maybe on behalf of the group, Michaela and I can work with everyone to just figure out what the preferred date or day of the week and some timings for evening meetings that might work for folks.
Okay. Well, and I'm sure you recognize, Jed, that Tuesdays are not a great day for the planning board people.
Right.
So, I mean, it seems like that would put us into March and either perhaps the 16th or the 23rd, which are Wednesdays.
Wednesdays are bad for me anytime from 5 on.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
I think also that, Jed mentioned evening meetings. I don't know that we have to think too much about evening meetings as a working group. I see that the policy decisions, which are the most important, are going to be discussed by the planning board at their meetings. And that's where the public really should be participating. I don't know if anybody agrees with that, but that's just my observation.
It certainly is a very tidy solution. That's really good.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
So I think we could, consider meeting in the middle of the day, maybe on Wednesday or something like that. But as far as the policy decisions, I'd like to see that discussed and those decisions made by the planning board at their open meetings.
okay, and if it's touching on non-conforming or things that normally go to the ZBA, I assume that would be the same for those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah, and
good.
the ZBA can have Noreen, the ZBA can certainly have agenda items to discuss comments that they want to bring to the working group or send to the planning board for inclusion in the recodified zoning bylaw. And I think you should
Okay.
be doing that as a board, as a body.
Okay. That makes sense.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it'd be much better when you speak, Noreen, that you say that the board has considered this and this is what the board wants. I mean, it gives you much more import when you speak too, okay?
Makes sense.
Yep, it does. It makes a lot of sense, Frank.
So
This
then
must be
does,
why we're keeping you.
does Wednesday midday work for everyone here? Is that,
Yeah.
Did for a
Yes.
long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not on the 16th. I'm not available on the 16th on a Wednesday.
And the 16th is not good for us either here. So I think we have to push this to the 23rd.
23rd works for me.
Fine with me.
Okay with me.
It's fine.
Okay with me?
great? 11 o'clock still works for everyone?
Yeah.
11 to 1, or as much as we
It's
need.
okay.
Great. So thank you, everyone, for coming, for contributing, and for going through it quickly. That was really great. And we'll see you on the 23rd.
Okay. Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank
All right,
you.
Thanks, everybody. Very helpful.
Bye.
Yeah.